You're listening to the 15 Minutes with Frank podcast.
Hey, welcome back to 15 Minutes with Frank. My name is Frank, and I'm glad that you are here. Hey, I just want to say first and foremost, the outpouring and encouragement for the show lately has been super phenomenal. If you want to continue to support the show, if this show has been at all any kind of encouragement to you, please head over to iTunes, give me a 5-star review if you can. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the show. That helps people see it on iTunes. And then on YouTube, if you're watching this and you're seeing this right now and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It really does help me a lot. If you have a YouTube account and you're listening to this and you don't really use YouTube like that, though, but if you have a YouTube account, please subscribe, because that even helps me as well, right? And then I've been posting this on Instagram and Facebook. Any way you can share it, please share it. 15 Minutes with Frank, all spelled out. That's where it's going to be found. On YouTube, it's on my personal account, Frank Gill. Hey, I am so glad that you are here. We're going to talk about kind of 3 apps, more like 3 kinds of apps that I use all the time in ministry. I love having this conversation every 6 months to a year, because things change and my rhythms change sometimes depending on the season I'm in. But there are 3 apps that I use consistently every single day, probably, if not every single week for sure, that I think could be beneficial for you. And if there's apps I haven't talked about or tools I haven't mentioned in this show, I want to hear from you, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, or in the comments on YouTube. I want to know what you're using. So with that being said, before we go any further, I want to talk about this conference that's happening in a few weeks. If you're in youth ministry, you have to be there. Check this out. Usually every year we talk about NYWC, National Youth Workers Convention. And for the past few years, I've been able to go. I've been able to do a little breakout. I've been able to do my live podcast, and it was dope. It was awesome. But obviously it's not happening this year. Ohio won't let us do anything, right? So with that being said, the great folks at Orange, DYM, the Fuller Youth Institute, I think a few other people, they're doing some amazing things this year by doing the Youth Ministry Exchange. All right, it's gonna be like a roundtable discussion, some great voices in youth ministry. I'm gonna be a part of it. I get to moderate and host some stuff. So if you are looking for that big youth ministry conference experience, and you obviously, we can't go to a conference, I want you to go to check out Youth Ministry Exchange. It's in October. It's going to be super awesome. It's going to be online. It's going to be accessible. And I want you to use the link that you can see in this video. But if you're listening to this, I want you to go to the link in the show notes. All that's going to be there. I want you to at least give me the opportunity for you to look and see what's available, because it is going to be an awesome conference. All right, please use my link. It does help the show, but you should be a part of it, because I'm going to be a part of it. I think you should be a part of it. Youth Ministry Exchange is going to be super dope. A lot of great friends are going to be there. You're going to want to be there. All right, see ya. Technology changes all the time, and there are some apps that I feel like are ubiquitous. I don't know how to say that word right now. Ubiquitous? I think I said it right. Ubiquitous. There's some apps that are ubiquitous. Forget it. There's some apps that I feel like everyone knows about, right? That everyone has, and obviously I'm not going to talk about the email app or the messaging app. I'm talking about apps that perhaps you're in ministry and you're looking for ways to be more productive or efficient or streamlined or whatever the case may be. Some of these you might already have, some of these you don't, right? For example, Planning Center is a common app that everyone usually have if they use Planning Center all the time. PCO, Planning Center Online. I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about 3 apps that maybe you don't use that often because it just hasn't been in your rhythm. But regardless, these are the apps I use all the time in my ministry. And if I didn't have these, I would be lost. Right now, I need these apps. And I'm going to explain all of them to you in detail. First one is the app called Tasks, Tasks. Tasks is basically a to-do list. But there are tons of to-dos. My favorite used to be Wunderlist. There was another app before that I used that had a desktop client and a phone app. And that's the thing I want to use. Whenever I use an app, I want to be able to use it both on my computer when I'm on my laptop or on my phone. And sometimes they're hard to come by that have a good UI between both of them. Tasks is great because it's like a normal to-do list on your phone, and it's great because it has a way to put a big to-do list, but if you have task below that, you can put that in there. You can put the reminders or deadlines in there. It's very, very, very simple, right? If you use Asana, it's kind of similar to that, except it's way more scaled down than Asana. It's not like a teamwork app, which Asana is good for. But if it's just for you, if you're just trying to make sure you are doing your to-do list, or you don't want to forget your own to-do list, Task is pretty great. What I love about it, it's made by Google, and so it streams well into your Gmail suite or your Google Calendar. So what I love about it is every time I pull up my email on my desktop, I use the Gmail not the desktop client, but the web through the browser. On the side, there's a panel there that has the Task app there. And that's actually how I discovered it. I was like, what is these panels over here that are to the side of my emails? And I started playing with them, and then I discovered Tasks. And it's been a lifesaver. So whenever I'm sending an email and an email prompts me to remind myself I need to do something, I just go over to this Task app and I click, in the cursor, and I type out what I'm planning on doing. What's great is it syncs automatically with my phone, and if I'm away from my computer and I need to use the Task app to remind myself what I need to do, I can have that on my phone ready to go. Sometimes if I'm not using my email a lot, I'll just have my Task app open on my phone so I can use that while I'm working. What's also great is that the same kind of prompt that happens in your email account in Gmail also opens up on your calendar app. So if I have a task that I need to if I'm working on my calendar and I'm trying to figure out what I have to do, I can go to my tasks and also add stuff to my calendar or add stuff to my tasks based on my calendar. It's just it's an app that shows up in the right places. Does that make sense? Like where other ones I have to open another window or have that next to my whatever, it's in my email account, it's in my calendar app, and it's on my phone, and it's just everywhere where I need it to be. And I'm a simple guy. That's all I want. I want it to be accessible when I need it, and when I forget that I need it, I want it to be there so I can remember it's there, right? Task app is great. It's by Google. Go check that out. Speaking of Google, this might sound redundant because you might already do this, but the entire G Suite, entire Google Suite, as I use Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google there's the PowerPoint one, which I don't really use too often, but Google Drive I use a lot, and obviously Google Calendar and Gmail. I use all that stuff, so I love the G Suite, and I actually have a folder in my phone with all those apps in there. And the reason is this: so when I moved from Arkansas to Wisconsin. The whole church was on the Google Suite, and I never really used Google Docs like that. I just had Microsoft Word. But at that time, 5 years ago, Google Docs had some limitations that Microsoft Word didn't. But I just said, hey, I want to be on the same page with everyone else. What's great is whenever you make a document, it's so easy to share with someone else, so easy to have people edit it together where you don't really have that accessibility with Microsoft Word unless everyone has Microsoft Word. Google Docs kind of saves all that kind of stuff when it comes to not multitasking, but having multiple people work on the same document. When it comes to spreadsheets, I use those spreadsheets in Google Docs all the time, man. Since I've become kind of the pseudo online campus pastor, I have a spreadsheet that's constantly ongoing, constantly active, updating the metrics of all of our watch times and viewership on all of our places where we're watching the sermon online. When it comes to budget season and kind of internal documents within our church, all that stuff is passed through Google Docs. And whenever I need to remember, for example, I'm on the communications team. I preach. I'm on the preaching team, and we have a spreadsheet that has basically from now all the way for the next 6 to 8 months saying who's going to preach when, what text they're going to preach on, all that kind of stuff. And all that is on a spreadsheet. And so whenever I'm okay, when do I preach next? I open my app on my phone. I go to Google Sheets and I look up when I'm going to preach next. And then I know when I'm supposed to preach. It's just a really cool tool that it's always online. It's always live. And it's helpful. And so whenever I need to edit something on the fly, whenever I'm outside and I come up with a sermon illustration and I'm working on a sermon, I can open my Google Doc on my phone and start editing. I mean, if you have Google Docs, you already know this kind of stuff. This is kind of old school news for you. But if you aren't using the Google Suite, and you've just been using Microsoft Word your entire life, I would encourage you. There are some differences, and I don't want to change your rhythm on you, but the benefits of getting onto the Google Suite to be able to do your documents, your sermon writing, your spreadsheets, all that stuff, totally outweighs some of the added features on Microsoft Office. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're a Microsoft Office evangelist, but I have just been converted to the Google Suite. If you're concerned about privacy, I get it. but I don't think Microsoft Word is any less private. But that's not the point. The point is, I have the Google Suite on my phone. I use literally all those apps every single day. I literally use the spreadsheet app, the Google Docs app, and I use Google Calendar, obviously, and the email every single day. And what's great is I now been able to share those documents all the time. And whenever you need to export it, maybe that's something. This is a bonus thing. Actually, I'll talk about that in a second. I preach from my iPad. I'll tell you how I export it and what I use to preach from it. But I use Google Docs all the time and the Google Suite all the time. It's amazing. It's 2020. It feels weird I'm even encouraging people to do this because I feel like a lot of people are on there. But certainly there's someone listening to this that's like, I never thought about using Google Docs. I'm a Microsoft Word guy. I'm encouraging you to use Google Docs because that way, if anything happens to your computer, that thing is saved in the Google server somewhere in California or somewhere else. I don't know. And you can always have access to that on different computers, all that kind of stuff. All right. So we talked about the Task app from Google. We talked about the G Suite from Google. This last thing is not a Google product. By the way, this isn't sponsored by Google, but the last thing is called Calendly. Calendly. So calendar, but instead of that ER at the end, it's LY, Calendly. I just now got an assistant at work. So for the first time in 15 years of ministry, I've never had like an assistant to schedule stuff for me. But even now, it's still kind of like complicated to be able. I'm still learning what that looks like to have an assistant. So maybe if you've had an assistant, you can kind of teach me how that relationship is supposed to work. Because I'm still trying to understand outside of just simply giving her my receipts, which is probably the best thing of this whole relationship. Is I give her receipts and she deals with it. Is to be able to work my calendar. But Calendly really changed the game for me about a year and a half ago, maybe. I just started noticing that I needed to schedule meetings with people, schedule meetings with parents when I was in youth ministry, but now I'm like scheduling meetings with people in general on my team. And I needed a way where it can kind of do it without me, right? So I don't there were so many people asking to meet with me that were in my church, and I had to take time to look at my calendar, to talk to their calendar, to figure out what works best at what time, where we're going to meet. Calendly solves all that stuff. It's automated. It syncs up with your Google Calendar if you use that. It might sync up with other calendars if you use other calendars in your church. But what I love about it is you kind of go in there, you kind of tell them these are the time frames I'm okay with having a meeting. You can tell them if it wants to be on a Zoom meeting, if it's an in-person meeting, where that person meeting needs to happen. You can ask other fields like their phone numbers and maybe what topics do you want to talk about? Whatever. It's very, very customizable. And then basically in an email or whatever, you send them a link and say, hey, you want to meet with me? I would love to meet with you. Hey, go to this calendar, set up a time, pick a time that best fits for you. And it automatically finds the time that best fits for your calendar. And then boom, you have a meeting. And whenever that meeting is set, other meetings will not ever happen in that place because it's on your Google Calendar, but it's also Calendly remembers not to double book you and stuff like that. It is one of the best tools, especially right now where I'm doing this thing where I'm meeting with everybody in my launch team for 15 minutes over Zoom. There's over 100 people on my team. That was a daunting task to schedule all that. I sent one link and then boom, boom, boom. I get a bunch of emails saying that my calendar is filling up and they are the ones filling up the calendar on themselves at the appropriate times where I can actually meet with them. Calendly is probably one of the most important tools I've mentioned this whole episode because it's just a helpful tool. There's a free option and there's a paid option. But all that stuff, all those links will be in the show notes below. But I just love Calendly because it saved so much time for me as opposed to me spending time working, asking, can this work for you? Can this work for you? What works for you? Nope. I'd be able to just send one link, and it works out. And there's a phone version where you can kind of see what your calendar looks like. You can edit some stuff, edit some times, add more buffers between meetings, all that kind of stuff. So Task, G Suite, and Calendly. Okay, before I let you go, this came to my mind when I was talking about the G Suite thing. When I write sermons, I preach from my iPad, and a common question that gets a lot of times is, what app do you use when you preach from your iPad? Now, if you're just a printer, paper kind of guy, and you just preach from actual paper notes and stuff like that, then there's nothing to tell you, right? You use Google Docs, use Microsoft Word, and keep printing. But I want to be able to have kind of a resource folder of all my sermons in case, the senior pastor croaks, I have to go on stage and preach a sermon. I have it already on my iPad, all that kind of stuff. So here's what you should know. Google Docs, I set up my sermons, size 18 font with a 1/2-inch border all around because I want it as big as it can be on my iPad. Size 18 font on paper is not the same as size 18 font when you're reading it from an iPad. It shrinks down a little bit. So it kind of is the perfect size to be able to see it. And then I export it to an app called Goodreader. So there's a ton of apps. Some people even read it straight up from Google Docs. There's a different like PDF viewing apps. There's like, I mean, you could probably even look in the preview app if you wanted to. But I love Goodreader. It has a very simple UI where like once you click on it, it's just the document, and it has a natural kind of like a Kindle that you just slide in the pages like you would if you had paper notes. And then within the app, you have the ability to edit stuff, not necessarily edit the PDF, but you can like cross out stuff on your PDF, write notes above it. If you have the Apple Pen, if you're using an iPad, you can write stuff in there. I love Goodreader. It's made things super simple, super easy for me, and I love it. It's great. So that was a bonus one. I give you 3 apps: Task, Google, the Google Suite, and Calendly, and then Goodreader. All that stuff is going to be in the show notes below or in the description of this video. Hey, if you have a tool that you use that I didn't mention, please tell me. I want to know what it is because I want to maybe put it in my rhythms of my ministry. But that's all I have to say for today. Please continue to subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. Please rate and review on iTunes. Please give me a like if you like this video on YouTube. All that good stuff. But until next time, bye, buddies.